A very good evening to all the dignitaries, dear students, and to all the attendees in the session, and a very warm welcome to our keynote speaker for this session, Mr. Ram Gopal. I, Ruchi Shukla, Assistant Professor at Amity University, Patna, welcomes you all on this occasion of Leadership Summit Momentum 2020. Let me take this privilege to introduce you to the guest of honor for this session, Mr. Ram Gopal, who is currently serving as the Chief Executive Officer at Barclays Bank, India. He is a seasoned general manager with a track record of building businesses, leading transformational change, and fostering entrepreneurship. He has also served as regional head of consumer operations at Standard Chartered Bank, wherein he was responsible for establishing a predictive, customer centric process environment, driving best in class risk performance, creating a competitive cost structure, and developing a pool of talented and competent personnel in Middle East and South Asia. He also served as assistant manager credit operations at Citibank. He's a certified chartered financial analyst and an alumnus of University of Chicago, wherein he pursued his masters in business administration. He has been acclaimed as a true leader with excellent management skills and has secured brilliance in people management coupled with in depth subject knowledge. He is an inspiration for so many people, especially young budding managers, and a valuable asset to any organization. Sir, on behalf of Amity University, Patna, let me express this fact that we are overwhelmed with your presence from the core of our heart, and we thank you for your valuable time. With these words, I take the privilege of inviting you, sir, to take the deliberations further. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ruchi. What a wonderful introduction. I think it will possibly do my confidence a world of good just to listen to you. Maybe I should come back to your Amity, once in a while, just to hear you be generous with your words. Thank you so much. Dr. Pandey, I think it's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you for thinking of me and inviting me to join your students and reflect on my career and some learnings on the way. I just echo what everyone spoke about, which is Varun's session. What an eloquent and an articulate gentleman. I think one of the things that struck a chord with me, and maybe this is a great way to start our conversation now, is the fact that, one of the things that he was urging your students, the 21-year-olds, as he called it, is never join a large company. Now, look at my career. I have spent what now 27, 28 years working with companies that have lasted more than 100, 125 years. I work for a company now, Barclays, which is 327 years old, older than the Bank of England. And, what does that mean really? To say that maybe we are missing a trick if we worked for a large company. And I think in my mind, the last, as my career in the last 2, 3 decades have unfolded, I think where I sit now is it does not matter whether you work for a startup or you're working for a large company, as long as it provides purpose and meaning for your endeavors. So I thought I must quickly, come in just in case you tomorrow, if McKinsey or let's say Barclays were to knock at your doors, you say, okay, Mr. Varun has told me that I ought to work only for Paytm. So please, you may possibly be missing a call. Just to put that in context. But very articulate, very articulate. And I guess the problem with a session like this, when you're going to be exposed to speakers of such brilliance, and I think not just the prior sessions and the sessions to come, is that frankly, this session will pale in comparison. And I'm fine with that. This is a bit of a caveat. I typically do that before I start. If you're looking for great insights, maybe I think you have a better opportunity to pick insights by reading a book or listening to someone else in the next 45, 50 minutes we've got together. But I'll try and talk about things that have worked for me in my career. And this is more to start a conversation, not really want to, put that across as a as a truism. This is how it ought to work, or this is the only way it will work. These are my experiences, something that has made me who I am, and therefore I thought I should not shy away from talking about that. So I want to pick up my story with my first job at Citibank. This was way back in 1993. That was the time when in India you did not have credit cards the way we know it today. We had a closed loop card which Bank of Baroda were issuing, but the first foreign bank to really offer the credit card, which is now ubiquitous and possibly passe to even think about in Varun's days, or in his words, to talk about some of the stuff that he and his company is doing, to talk about credit card seems to be like a relic of the past. But my story started from there when we were trying to launch that buy now, pay later philosophy in this market. And quite aside from the challenge that in those days you had a view that it is not actually socially acceptable to be a borrower. That was in our psyche. You would rather pledge your gold and try and make your ends meet, as opposed to buying anything on credit. That was largely the consumer psyche at the time when I entered this industry. And I think what a fabulous learning ground it was. And I was a banker by accident, and maybe if it interests any of you, and as part of the session today, if you got some time, maybe we can spend time talking about it. But it is fair to say that I was an accidental banker. And this was the first job I had. I joined the credit department of this bank, wanting to sell this buy now, pay later product to consumers who frankly had it was not in their psyche. And one of the things that I noticed, two lessons that I wanted to pick up from that journey. It was a brief journey, and I'll tell you why it was brief as well. But the first lesson was one around how, for any achievement to speak of, one has to be anchored with aspiration, which is there is a direct correlation between aspiration and achievement. To achieve anything spectacular, meaningful, one has to aspire for it. And you heard notions of think big. You've heard notions of be intentional. You have heard notions of be purposeful. All of it is the same concept. And I'll tell you why I picked this lesson, a foundational lesson in my first stint. At the time when I joined Citibank, we were, like I said, starting off, and we were processing roughly about the job that I had was to look at applications from customers, and you need to make an assessment whether you want to give them a credit or not, whether they are credit worthy or not. You got to assess their ability to pay and their willingness to pay based on what they have declared and what you ask of them. That was essentially what the role is. And at that time when I joined the company, we were doing roughly about, let's say, 20,000 applications a month. So you had an approval rate, which was basically, that is, for every application or 100 applications that you saw, you would possibly approve 35%. Yeah, so the approval rate was 35%. You were processing roughly about 20,000 applications, so roughly about 7,000 cards is what you were doing. But everybody around me was talking to me about the day that is not far off when the same shop, when the same company would process millions and millions of applications. In fact, now if I talk about, in this world, if I talk about 15x, 20x, people will think, hey, what? A startup is 100x. What are you talking 15x, 20x? But that 15x, 20x in the world that I was very big numbers. And so we were talking about doing something like 150,000 applications or something around 1 million applications a month. and everybody talked up the opportunity. And true enough, in 3 years' time, when I was ready to leave, we were processing 1 million applications. Yeah, so one fundamental lesson is that nothing big comes off unless you have the aspiration for it. Yeah, and as students who are in the threshold of deciding your own career, whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you want to join, be a career banker or any industry that you want to be part of, be very intentional about where you want to go, what you want it to be. I think that is my first lesson that I learned, and first thing that I wanted to share with you folks. The second lesson is one around people. And Varun said this, and I will just echo it, which is that no, all of this business, in fact, management, the word management itself, has it. Management is man management. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. Specifically now, which is true, right? In COVID, in a scenario where, if you think about the pandemic that we are in, in these last 7 months, the first and foremost concern for us is about relationships that matter for us. How are our loved ones doing? How are our relationships, whether it is clients, customers, inside the company, peers, etc.? How are those cherished relationships doing? That's our top of mind. And in city, that was proven all over again and again. In fact, everybody would give their right arm. I'm talking about even today, it is true of Citi, but at that time more so, because this was the first foreign bank in a meaningful way in the consumer side, and people would give their right arms to be in that company. So they were hiring the best of the best, be it pedigreed from, let's say, foreign universities, from our own, Indian Institute of Management Sciences, the chartered accountancy, chartered accountants, etc., were just bursting into the scene. People were willing to give their right arm to enter this company. So I was surrounded by some fantastic people. And therein lies the lesson, right? Which is about, before you even talk about any productive endeavor, the first question that ought to be in your mind is, who are you going to do it with? First who, then what. This is exactly the theme that one of the management books that I would recommend, if at all you folks are, any one of you is serious about management as a career. One of the books that I recommend is this Good to Great by Jim Collins. And this is about what great managers do. And the first thing is about decision on who you want on the bus before you decide on where you want to drive the bus to. It was absolutely true of my city days. Yeah. And you immediately get to understand that intelligence, smartness is a point of entry. Beyond that, it's not going to give you the altitude that you are looking for in a career. That comes from forming meaningful relationships and knowing what your strengths are, how you can coexist among brilliant people. These are foundational lessons, and I'm thankful and ever so grateful that I learned this very early in my career. Yeah, so two things to think about is, first one is be intentional. There is a correlation between aspiration and achievement. The second one is very important to nurture relationships. Everything is about people. Ensure that you make your decision about who you want to be in the team with. You heard this many times over, right? You don't join jobs or you don't leave jobs because of pay, etc. You do that because of who your manager is, and that's so true, right? So pick who you want to be in the bus with. So that's the second thing that I want to talk about. I'll quickly move on. My career in Citibank was short because I thought I learned my foundational lessons, and I wanted to keen to round up my career with a stint abroad, so that what worked for me in the foundational years will work for me in a different setup, in a different context completely. And some of you who know the Middle East at that point in time you would realize that, and I was the butt of many a joke in our own family, right? Because my sisters were all very accomplished. Yeah, one was an engineer, the other one was a chartered accountant. They all went on. Everything was they. It was they who set up this reference point, and I was like this. Did not work out too much. I ended up in the Middle East. Can't make it to the West or to the East, so you land up somewhere in between in the Middle East. So that was the but, and Middle East, specifically Dubai, at that point in time was known more for blue collar workers than the cosmopolitan, give any big city in this world a run for its money, be it New York, London, France, Paris, whatever. I think Dubai will give a run for it. But we saw the city grow in front of our own eyes in that 12, 13 years that I was in Dubai. I joined Standard Chartered Bank. It was fabulous. They were setting up a cards business in UAE, and this was a chance for me to implement whatever I've learned in the Indian context into the Middle Eastern context. And what a fantastic stint it was for me. And again, ever so grateful for all my supervisors. Two key takeaways from that stint. The first one is one of a strategy lesson, which was about you typically tend to think about strategy as what you will do. Seldom do you think about strategy as what you will not do. And this was a lesson which I learned in Standard Chartered. So my career grew along with Standard Chartered Bank, as in I started off with a cards business in UAE, then we launched in Bahrain, Qatar. Then in 2000, we did this fabulous acquisition of the ANZ, the Grindlays portfolio from ANZ Bank. We immediately became not just UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, but we became Jordan, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, and then we had Africa. So we became a region, Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. By the time I was ready to leave Standard Chartered, this region was about 33 markets. So it was a huge portfolio managing consumer apps and tech for Standard Chartered's effort in that region. And one of the things that happened was, because we were very successful with the acquisition of the Grindlays portfolio from ANZ, very much like the Cisco's of the world, it was as if we developed a cookbook for successful integration. So I moved from based in Dubai. Even though I was based there, I went to Seoul. There was an acquisition that Standard Chartered did with the Korea First Bank there, what is now known as the Korea First Bank, but it was like David acquiring the Goliath. Or let's say, for example, in today's parlance, let's say one branch office acquiring the State Bank of India. How will it be? So that was like how it was for us acquiring this setup in Korea. Very, very difficult circumstances. And again, if there is any follow-up question, I can talk about why integrations in a difficult context is so interesting and so much of a learning ground. And then that was successful. I went to Karachi. That was the first acquisition by a foreign bank in Pakistan's banking environment. This was hugely successful. We acquired a Union Bank, the consumer bank integration I ran, very, very successful again. So it was as if we were perfecting the art of how to narrow down target and how to assimilate them inside the Standard Chartered score. Then some assets became available in the US. So here was a bank which defined itself, its strategy to be an emerging markets bank, suddenly having the opportunity of acquiring assets in the Western markets. Now, one would argue that banking is banking, whether it is in the Middle East, whether it is in South Asia, whether it is in the emerging markets, or whether it is in the developed market, banking should be the same. But the decision at that point in time, and it was such a big lesson for me, is that they decided that our strategy is to be focused on the emerging markets, banking, and the developed markets. And then that was successful. We acquired a Union Bank, so the consumer bank integration I ran, very, very successful again. So it was as if we were perfecting the art of how to narrow down target and how to assimilate them inside the Standard Chartered score. Then some assets became available in the US. So here was a bank which defined itself, its strategy to be an emerging markets bank, suddenly having the opportunity of acquiring assets in the Western markets. Now, one would argue that banking is banking, whether it is in the Middle East, whether it is in the emerging markets, or whether it is in the developed market, banking should be the same. But the decision at that point in time, and it was such a big lesson for me, is that they decided that our strategy is to be focused on the emerging markets, leading the way in Asia, Middle East, and Africa. That was our credo. That was our mojo or motive. And therefore, these assets that were becoming available in the developed world was something that the bank did not want to pursue. It was a fantastic decision, because no sooner did they take the decision, the 2007 great financial crisis happened, and you know what the story was in the developed markets. People lost a truckload of money, and Standard Chartered would have lost a lot of money had we gone with that acquisition. So a great learning for me. The next big one is just what I spoke about just now, which is how do you work in an environment where you've got not just diversity of ideas, but diversity of cultures, diversity of agendas. You were running a matrix environment, right? So let's say, for example, I was running consumer. You had the global head of consumer, and you have these 33 markets. Each one of them have their head of the consumer business. So how do you create an agenda that makes sense not just for you, but for each of these different stakeholder constituencies? Now today it is passe, right? Diversity, inclusion is like almost like a mantra, but we learned it the hard way then, as to how it is important that we have in our mind flexibility. It is not enough if you are smart, if you are intelligent. It requires for the smartness and the intelligence to be subordinated to the greater good. That is a big lesson about diversity and integration that I learned in my stint. Yeah, so again, two lessons that I put in front of you in my exposure to the Middle East, Asia, and the African market. One about how strategy sometimes has to be defined by what you would not do. That's why we keep saying, no, focus, focus, focus. Why is it so important? Because it is important that we get away from the distractions, so that this correlation between aspiration and achievement, if it has a chance to survive, it can only survive if you are focused on what you want. I want to be, let's say, a master management guru. At the same time, I want to be, let's say, somebody pursuing the best of best in two other parallel fields. Now there are some hard choices one has to make. People ask quite a bit about how do you marry your work and life. Work life integration is a big topic. And I think all of this comes from being very clear about what's important at what point in time. So, focus, I think that the lesson around strategy is one around focus. And the next one is about carrying a flexible or a growth mindset. Yeah, there's lots of things that has been said about how one needs to retain intellectual flexibility and not be not succumb to fixed mindset or rigors of your opinion. So I think these were two lessons in my Middle East. I'll just go on for one more stint, which is the Barclays one, and then I will pause and we can get to questions. And I'm sure each one of you have got your own stories to tell. I'm more than happy to listen. So I came back to India because my parents were aging and ailing. And one of the things also was that, for some of us who missed the bus in the 90s when India opened up, new banking licenses were issued. Varun spoke about Mr. Puri and his phenomenal success in building one of the best banks. So HDFC license was given out, ICICI license was given out, and some of us who missed that bus being in the Middle East felt that we wanted an opportunity to come back, and whatever success we had, or whatever we experienced, or whatever we called it as success, we kind of experience it in our own backyard in India. And that was the time when the prevailing notion was India shining, right? About the fact that we have this huge demographic dividend, and the consumer business is one that had many chapters to unfold. And I didn't want to miss an opportunity, even though late as I was, to join that bandwagon. So when this opportunity came up with Barclays to set up a retail and a commercial business for them here in this market, I jumped at the opportunity. But what a spectacular failure it was. Spectacular failure. This was in my career. Maybe it came late. Not that I'm kind of saying that in my prior 15 years that I was with Citi and Standard Chartered, I never faced failures. That's far from it. Every day you face some punches and you tell yourself that tomorrow will be a better day. I don't mean in that way, but this was spectacular, not in terms of in terms of its size. Roughly about what, 500, 600 million pounds. That's a staggering amount of money, and a lot of people who you hired, you had to suddenly dehire. So what happened? So let me share you the story and the lesson from it. In the and the story was this, which is, we spoke about India shining, we spoke about the demographic dividend, and the thought that we should be able to build a great consumer business with such a fantastic brand like Barclays. We had the capital, we had the best of best talent, we had a business model, we had the business model was validated by some of the best brains in the world, McKinsey's and the SARS. So that wasn't a problem. Team wasn't a problem. Capital wasn't a problem. Brand wasn't a problem. What is then a problem? Why did we fail? At that time, when I was going through, it was hard to kind of look back and try and piece it together, right? But given time has passed and we've been able to exercise the ghosts of the past, I've been able to try and connect the dots looking back. And I realized that one of the things that we didn't get right was timing. And this was something that a gentleman called Bill Gross spoke about, how the number one criteria about successful startups vis-a-vis not so successful startups is about getting the timing right. Now, the big question is, timing in the sense that, do you know this product resonates with your marketplace? Is this the right thing? And, it'll be a bit of sour grapes if I narrated that story, but it is a true story. It is my story. So I have to say that much before Varun or Shekhar Sharma or whoever thought about this Paytm and wallet and all of that, Barclays were with the RBI trying to talk to them about a wallet based on a platform called USSD, which is agnostic. You don't need a smartphone to move money. You could do it out of feature phones. At that point in time, feature phones was in vogue. The problem at that time was that RBI capped the expenditure on wallet to be at 5,000 rupees. Now imagine, to go through the process of opening an account through USSD, which is a clunky process by itself. The UX is not so customer friendly. Just to do 5,000 rupee transaction over a period of 30 days was a non-starter. And rightfully so, the product did not take up. But come demonetization, and look at the story now that is unfolding. Paytm, Phone Pay, Google Pay, WhatsApp Pay. This is just tremendous. So timing is about knowing when it is right for your clients. I think it may possibly not be, you can do some market research, etc., to try and assess that. But I think timing is always going to be reflective. You've got to think back to see whether you got it right or not. It's hard to be prescriptive. So that was one big lesson that I learned. And the last lesson, and I will stop with that, is the one around how do we make innovation happen in large companies. So one of the things that, the reason why I think there is so much premium placed on startups and some of these fintechs is the fact that somehow they seem to be agile, they seem to be nimble in meeting clients' demands. And these large companies, like mine, which is 327 years old, it's difficult to veer around. And that is a problem because you have a core business which is making you a lot of money, which is, why you are you have been 327 years old, right? Because this is your cash cow. You continue to have a core set of clients, you continue to service them well. How do you take $1 of investment from there and put it into a venture which you don't really know whether it will succeed or not? What will be your justification for taking that investment off from your core business and putting it into this engine two, which is the engine for the future? Would the shareholders accept that? Because they themselves can do it, right? Look at the classic theory on dividends. The classic theory suggests in finance that you want to dividend out because any diversification that the company wants to do, the investor can do it himself. You don't need to necessarily move from soup to nuts. The investor, as long as you know what your competence is, you stick to it, and the investor, by virtue of the returns that you give him, is free to choose whichever investment that he now wants to place this money in. And therefore, the concept that the banks ought to be sticking to its knitting, bank or any venture needs to be sticking to its venture, and diversification is best left to investors. Now, if that's theory holds good, then what is the justification of pulling investments from your core, which is working so well, and putting in these experimental technologies, blockchain, some of these things that you hear about, and you wonder whether bitcoins, whether you want to be you're missing a game or whether you want to be really in it. And this is a puzzle that I've not really solved as yet, but this is where I feel like it's as if I'm working in a startup, because how do you make the elephant dance? Yeah, it's a fascinating story. It is a story whose whole book has not been written. Few chapters have been written. I'm happy to be, I'm grateful that I have a chance to write the next few chapters on this engine, on this phenomenon of how to make large corporations agile and nimble. So with that, I will close. I welcome comments. I will welcome questions. So over to you, Professor Ruchi, or anybody else who wants to take the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. It was a very, very informative session, and learning through your life experiences, it was actually very insightful for us. Now, time has arrived for our students to explore the opportunity to interact with you, for which they have been eagerly waiting. So, first of all, I would like to call upon Swarnim Srivastav to pose her query to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good evening, sir, and welcome to Amity. My name is Swarnim Srivastav, and I am currently pursuing MBA from Amity Business School. My question to you is, we as budding managers are going to soon step into the practical world, and it will be very important to manage our team well in any situation, especially a panic situation which is currently there. So, as you have been known for your excellence in leadership, could you please provide us some ways in which we can keep our team motivated in every situation?
Tarun, what a great question to start this discussion. I think you come to the very essence, right? What is the purpose of a manager or a leader in any setup, right? I think many theories abound. I think about this very simplistically. And I think that there are three roles that one ought to play in order to bring the best in others. And I think maybe the best way to start this is also to ask ourselves the question: why should anyone be led by us? In fact, it is a famous Harvard Business Review article, and there's a lot of research also on that topic as to why should anyone follow us? What is it about us that engenders followership? And I guess, where in our company, it's a tradition. The highest levels in the organization is a grade called managing directors. So in our company, whenever there is anybody who, it's like a partner in the consultancy, arena. So anybody becomes a partner or a managing director, one of the first things that they get is they get issued this article from HBR, which is the title that I just spoke about, which is "Why Should Anyone Be Led by You?" And I want to say a few things. The fundamental purpose of somebody, how do we engender followership? I think there are three roles. I think the first role is one of a support role. Yeah. Even before I get to what the role is, what is the purpose? Let's start with that, because I always said any endeavor has to be purposeful. It has to start with an aspiration, right? So, what is it about us in a corporate setting? What is it that we want to do? And I think the holy grail of management or holy grail of leadership is to be able to unlock potential. This is about, you can use many terms. Yeah, empower is one word, enable is another word that I use quite a bit, energize is another word that I use quite a bit. So, these are the three E's. In fact, why should anyone be led by you? My own answer is these three E's. Yeah, I think my purpose is to enable, energize, and empower others to be the best version of themselves. Yeah, so that's, let's say, you don't need to necessarily agree with me, but I just want to paint a picture of what is it that our purpose is inside a company when you're dealing with a lot of people. Yeah, and in that role, and how do you unlock potential, is by, again, like I said, three roles you play. The first role is one of support. That's very obvious by the word itself, right? You are there to coach, you are there to in some sense provide the tools, you are there to clarify why their particular initiative, venture, etc., how it adds to the big picture. I think those are some of the things that you do under the support bucket. Yeah, it's possibly the everyday management under that bucket. The second role I think you play is very important, is respect. I speak about respect from two angles. One is from the concept of this Toyota. I don't know how many of you Toyota has been for years put on a pedestal for lean as a word or as a concept has come from the Toyota production system. And at the heart of the Toyota production system is this concept of respect. What it means is that if you are truly respecting other people, then you would care for the environment in which they will work. As in, let's say, for example, you and I work, you are my supervisor, let's assume. If you truly respect me as a human being, you will ensure that my work environment or the work that I do is meaningful for me. You will care for me because you respect me as a human being. It's very important because people sometimes miss this. Respect is not something coming, you understand respect from the semantic, from the dictionary sense of the term. I'm talking about this from a philosophical standpoint of view, where if you truly respect somebody else, then you will genuinely care. And if you genuinely care, you wouldn't give them meaningless work. And remember how I started with any aspiration will lead to achievement, and that will be fruitful. You will persevere, you will have grit, you will have the tenacity to wake up after every shock or every punch, is only if it is purposeful and meaningful. And here is a way to provide purpose and meaning, is to create respectful environment. Yeah, so that for me it's a very big tenet, the concept of being respected at work. And the other dimension to respect is about giving space, because you may have some unique career goals. If I were to say that, hey, you are a woman and therefore your career aspiration ought to be limited to this or that, What am I? I mean, I'm imposing my world views on your world. Yeah, I'm not respecting you for your uniqueness. Yeah, and that is the other dimension which I talk about, respect. Yeah, so the first one is support in the way that we typically understand it. Respect has got two connotations. Respect therefore leads to meaningful work. Respect means to appreciation for unique career goals. And these are the two dimensions for respect. So first is support, second is respect. And the third dimension of being, how do you motivate others and all of that is one around trust. Varun spoke about this. There is hardly anything that I can do better than what he said, which is you've got to operate in a world where somebody else or whoever you want to unlock potential to feels that they have the autonomy, the freedom to be able to do what is for them the right thing to do. Yeah, as long as there is shared understanding of what right and wrong means. These are some thoughts I have on how you motivate people, or what is the purpose of a manager or a leader in a corporate setting. Please go ahead. Next question.
Yes, next in row is Shikhar Prasad. Shikhar, please switch on your camera and unmute yourself.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good evening, sir. I'm Shikhar Prasad, currently pursuing Bachelor's of Business Administration from Amity University, Patna. Sir, as a student of BBA and an aspiring banker, I would be really humbled if you, with your wealth of experience, could share with us some tips that can help us to break through into the financial sector.
Thank you, Shikhar. I think it is humbling for me that despite again, let me draw in Varun again into the picture. Despite his exhortation to not join large companies, you still want to join the financial services world. So thank you for that. I think there is still some hope for us. So tips. I think many of what I wanted to say has been covered when I talked about this thing about being intentional. Maybe let's kind of talk about it differently in terms of where technical skills and soft skills, maybe, let's use that as a basis for, seeing whether we can come to some kind of conclusion for your question. Yeah, I think the first place that I start is, I think it is passe that one has to at least in some sense be technically qualified. What do I mean by that? I think if you're in the financial, if you're aspiring to be in the financial services industry, I think some degree of understanding what the basic levers are for the business. How does a typical P&L look? What are the drivers for revenue? What are the levers for cost containment? How do you manage risk? In the typical value creation, there are three ways that you can think about creating value, right? And I'm assuming some of you or many of you will be familiar with present value or future cash flows, which is essentially what it says is that if you've got an asset, this asset is going to have a life over a certain period. And the way you can calculate the value of the asset right now is to know the value that it will create over a period of time, which is typically in the form of cash flows that it will generate, and then using some heuristic, either cost of capital or weighted average cost, you try and bring that back to the present, and therefore you get some sense of what some future outcomes would mean for today. Yeah, I'm generalizing it. But why that is important is when you talk about value creation, you can think about this in few dimensions. And I want to just seed that thought, without getting too technical about it. Yeah. So even if you do not understand the discounting of future cash flow, you've not missed much. Value creation typically happens in 3-4 angles. The first angle of value creation happens if there is some way by which we can enhance returns, right? So what do I mean by that? If I'm getting, if I put my whatever, let's say for example, $1 in investment as investment in the MET education, how you intrinsically in your mind you have made some calculation of what it will return in the future, right? I mean, in some sense, I'm try and create a theory around why somebody will go through the process of studying for 3 years or 4 years and then do a post graduation, etc. So one aspect is for that $1 you get some return. How is it that you can elevate that level of return? So in the corporate parlance, for example, if I was dealing with, let's say in the consumer business, and if the consumer business was, let's say 100 million in revenue line, I'm thinking about how do I grow it to, let's say 150 million? What do I need to do to be able to move from 100 to 150? So growth creates some value. Yeah. So that's the first way to think about it. Is there some way by which you can enhance value? The second way you can do is that some of these cash flows could occur at later periods in time. Can you accelerate that in such a way that it happens earlier in the time period than later? A dollar in hand is worth more than dollar in the future, right? So therefore, one way of thinking about value creation is to see whether you can accelerate those cash flows in such a way that you can capture them now. So in the corporate setting, this could be, okay, I deal with a certain client. That client gives me, let's say, $100 of business. Can I, for that client, increase my wallet share from 100 to, let's say, 110, 120? What would I need to do in order to be able to upsize my wallet with that particular client and do it now rather than later? That's the second way of thinking about value creation. The third way of thinking about value creation is to minimize the risk, the variance. Today I get $100 as a asset return. Tomorrow it is minus 50. Third day it is minus 20. Fourth day it is plus 10. I mean, there's so much of fluctuation, right? That variability creates noise. Can I kind of, if possible, smooth the risks in such a way that, there is a limited downside, the upside is protected? Can I take a hedge? That could be another way of thinking about value creation. And the last way of thinking about, or the final way I think of value creation, is to think about this from investing for the long term. As in, can we build some, we talked about Barclays brand, 327 years old, etc. Right? So can you invest in something that creates value just not for the immediate present, but for the future, for a long time to come? It could be, now everything is ecosystem, platforms, partners. It's not about you alone, right? Everybody wants to join hands with somebody else, be it on citizenship, be it on corporate purposes, etc. So that ecosystem creation is also another way by which it plays out over the longer term. You get value over the longer term. So first one is you accelerate. Then second one is you try to bring that forward. Third one is to minimize risk. Fourth one is to build assets. Yeah. So this is the general context. And I'm saying the same thing you can take for individuals entering the financial services industry. So you can tell, okay, if I have certain skills, how is it that I can value add to a particular situation in a particular company? That's why typically people say before an interview, please research about what the context is for the firm. Why is it? What are some of the problems that you are expected to face? What is it that one or two things they are looking for priority as a recruiter in you are some of those questions that you would have. And what you're really essentially trying to do is one of those four things to try and see where you fit in. Yeah. So I've given you a very generic framework, maybe not answered your specific question, but the beauty of this generic thing is you can apply not just for entering the financial services industry. You could think about this as a corporate manager, as a CEO, thinking about how to build value for your company. Or you could be an entrepreneur sitting in front of your co-founders or anybody that you're pitching, investors, for example, and where you're thinking about your company, where do you want to grow? You can use the same framework. So I'll leave you with that. Maybe not answered your question specifically, but there's some thoughts on how to create value.
Thank you so much, sir. I learned a lot from that answer. Thank you for answering that question, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. Next, we'll take up the question from Aman Kumar Sharma. Aman, please unmute yourself and switch on your camera.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, Aman.
Okay, ma'am. First of all, a very good evening, sir, and a very warm welcome to Amity University, Patna. Myself, Aman, and I'm pursuing BBA from Amity School of Business. So my question to you is that Barclays has successfully put up an initiative called Connect with Work program. Can you please tell us that how this initiative has benefited the students across the country?
Yeah, thank you so much. And, good and warm afternoon to you as well. This is something that, it's fantastic. I can't just express how happy I am that you picked this topic. When I entered the industry, and it could be true for Professor Ruchi and maybe Professor Pandey. Maybe I think you could recollect this. When I entered the industry, I think the prevalent norm was shareholder primacy, as in the ultimate holy grail for a company is to maximize shareholders' wealth. That's it. The other stakeholder who have, whether they were, collateral victims or they benefited, we call it in economics externalities. Yeah, whether they are positive or negative externalities, it does not matter as long as you are focused on one thing, which is that the shareholder wealth is maximized. Yeah. Now, if you talk about it like this in front of your board, you've written your resignation letter. Now it is stakeholder primacy. This is the view that beyond the company, there are other people who matter. Those could be your colleagues, employees, staff. Those could be customers, even before Amazon and its obsession with customers became famous. I think when we entered the industry, I don't think we would have survived if we weren't focused on clients. But at some point in time, when there was a trade-off to be exercised between economic gains for yourself, that is for your firm, vis-a-vis gains for your clients, you could argue, depending upon who you are, what values you had, how integrity sits with you, you could be anywhere in that fence. Yeah. So customers, colleagues, regulators, supplier partners. Now we call supplier partners. Dare anybody talk about this as vendors anymore? Yeah. So now we're talking about supplier partners or ecosystem players. So we have moved from this narrow world into a broader world. And the final C is about communities, which is where this Connect to Work program comes in. So by 2050, we would be carbon neutral across our client portfolios and Barclays itself. So right now, there's lots of funding that we do for companies who are in the old energy world, who do fracking, who are in the oil industry, etc. In fact, there's been lots of protests for companies who are still supporting industries which are energy vampires, if I can say that word, than energy conscious. So coming to what you said, so one of the things that we were very clear was beyond returns, etc., one of the key metric for us in our balance scorecard would be what we do for our communities. And this Connect to Work is basically a program which tries to address both sides of the employment gap. What do I mean by that? So in India, this is true for the broader global context, but in India, this is more true, which is I think roughly about, this is a statistics that I saw, roughly about 1 million people enter the workforce every month. Yeah, and the roles or the jobs, that is roughly a quarter of that. So, you have a huge employment gap between people entering the workforce and jobs. And even in those jobs, there are people who face a skill gap. As in, Varun spoke about this, right? I'm sorry to have, bringing him along every time, but he made some wonderful comments, right? And one of the things that he said was, I mean, it's a shame that people have aspiration to enter the financial services industry, but maybe do not know enough to manage their own finances. So how do we skill people in a manner that they are successful in their roles? So that's what we are trying to solve for. On one end, what we're trying to solve for is trying to ensure that people who join the workforce are job ready, the skilling thing. So we've joined the bandwagon of skilling. It's in our own small way, humble way. We are trying to push the wheels in such a way that people who enter the industry are more job ready than they would be otherwise. So alongside several, meaning with similar minded partners, we are working on a campaign to look at youth from typical tier 2, tier 3 cities and try and upskill them in such a way that they are job ready. And some of these numbers are staggering. And some of the stories that I hear are very humbling. It's been mind blowing. The other side of the employment gap that we're also trying to address is to make two things we are doing. One is we are trying to make people be entrepreneurs. And how are we doing it? We've got an open innovation lab called RISE. And what it does is it tries to incubate entrepreneurs and their ideas and try and scale them up into meaningful enterprises. At the top end, we have, not at the very top end, I'm talking about, what you would in India parlance call it as, small enterprise, not micro, but small enterprise. Once you've got the revenue roughly in the order of, let's say, 5 to 10 million pounds, then you're ready to go into one of our campaigns with another partner called Unreasonable, where for those entrepreneurs, we help them chart the journey from that 10 million pounds to 50 million pounds. So what is our hope? Our hope is that by creating avenues for people to be entrepreneurs, they can create jobs. So you're solving on the supply side and you're also solving for the demand side. I can't tell you how enthused I am and my team are on this thought. This is for us in the start. It's been last 3 years that we've been at this. Very, very encouraging. We hope to continue. COVID has been a fabulous revelation, and humblingly we were able to make, in my mind, a small contribution. So thank you for your question. So beyond shareholders, there exists wider stakeholders who are equally important. I think that's the message you should retain. Not about Barclays and our own Connect to Work program. It's great that you asked, but the key point is think about stakeholders, think about ecosystem.
Thank you so much, sir. It was great listening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. There are many students who have been eagerly waiting to interact with you, but just due to paucity of time, I'm really sorry to all those students. Can we take, sir, just one more question?
Yeah, sure. And I apologize as well, Professor Ruchi. I'm sorry, my answers were long-winded. I think I should get it a little more
So
sharper so
we
that
are
more people get a chance.
so we are having a great time listening to you and getting insightfulness from you. So please
Dr.
do.
Pandey wanted to say something, I
Yes,
think.
sir. Yes.
So we just would like to request you that anytime, whenever you are again available, we would like to request you to come to our platform so that the students who have not got chance to ask questions from you, they should be given opportunity to interact with you. Sir,
Sir.
your mic is muted.
I would love the opportunity, Dr. Pandey. Thank you so much
Thank you,
for it.
sir.
I'll
Thank
look you
you.
up. I'll
Thank
look
you.
you
Thank you.
up.
So
One last question.
yes, sir. One last question that is from Ritvik. Ritvik, please switch on your microphone and switch on your camera. I hope that there's some technical issue on his part. So one last question from Aryan Jha. Aryan Jha,
Ma'am,
in case
I'm here.
okay, Ritvik is here. Okay, Ritvik.
Sir, very good evening to you. Sir, my question, sir, I'm Ritvik Singh from BBA LLB 5th semester. Sir, my question to you is, like, how fintech has planned to reach its business to the rural population or the unorganized labor force. So I'm asking this question because they cover 80 crore of Indian population and they contribute more than 50,000 crore to the economy, sir. And sir, second thing, sir, it will lead India to the path of indigenization, which was the aim of our former president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He said in 2001 that India needs to be indigenized by 29% by 2020. And even today, our prime minister is also striving towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. And in such case, such service is really it is a blessing for such or unorganized labor force who has suffered within this amid COVID pandemic also, sir. So what is how you have or how fintech has mapped it, sir? That's it. Thank you, sir.
Fantastic, Ritvik. Very, very deep question. I like it, and it's fantastic. I think people are thinking about this. There are several things that you said. I can go off on a tangent on many different levels, but there are two things that I wanted to pick on. One is your specific answer to your question, but before I get there, there's one interesting thing. You mentioned Atmanirbhar Bharat. You
Yes,
mentioned
sir.
indigenization, right?
Indigenization, yes, sir.
The only word of caution that I have, Ritvik, is indigenization and Atmanirbhar should not mean import substitution.
Yes,
And these are
was, sir.
different themes. History hasn't been too kind. Now you
Yes,
could
sir.
say that, as with any financial investments, I come from the financial services industry,
Yes,
so
sir.
I should know this better. Past is no prediction for the future, but I can tell you the past has not been kind. Whenever we tried to raise tariffs and try to stop imports in a manner to grow our own, we were the entire, maybe I would always say this, right? Maybe at the cost of our generation, we shouldn't penalize future generations for that. Yeah, so I have in my mind, there are several. It's encouraging to see how the think tank the Indian government today is a lot more progressive, a lot more open, etc. But I just want you to be very clear what you're propagating. So please do not; these words are not interchangeable.
No, sir.
Yeah. I'm not saying you are, but I'm just
Yes,
drawing
sir.
a
Of
word of
course, of
caution.
course, of course,
Yeah.
sir.
So just and caution only from my point of view.
Yes, sir. Of
My
course, sir.
opinion, like I
Yes, sir.
said, is just my experience, right?
Yes,
You
sir. Of course, sir.
better judge about what you want to do. Yeah. So that's the
Yes.
first thing. The second comment that I want is, specific to your question about fintech and and Bharat, so to speak. And I like what you're saying. I think one of the biggest benefits that this fintech boom has seen is how we have democratized finance, right?
Yes, sir. Of
And
course.
I can say that in two three ways. The first way is just by creating digital footprint, how access to credit has become, at least though numbers speak for itself, But on paper, it is possible now with some bit of GST history, etc. It should be possible for you to have a basis to lend than when we were operating in a world where we did not have digital footprints, digital record. So, in some sense, we have democratized credit.
Yes.
There are innumerable number of startups that we have from the RISE Open Innovation Platform through Unreasonable, we have supported, where the entire theme is just about what you spoke and about what I was saying about democratization of credit.
Yes.
So that's the first piece around this. The second thing I think is also happening is the overall impact of COVID or the pandemic on the fintech scene. And we can try and see whether that will tell us anything about how it will impact the tier 2 and the tier 4 or Bharat in some sense. I think one of the things, and I'm echoing from a report that I read, I think one of the things is clearly the case that this pandemic has resulted in digitization of services, right? What was earlier a bit of a push, now I can certainly say there is a lot of pull. Even, we used to call this dynamic working, as in our company and any company, I would think, we had the option where colleagues would be able to operate from home. But there was not much taker. From the manager's side, he or she wasn't clear whether work from home means a leave, but not counted as leave, was the general, feeling.
Yes, sir.
And therefore, the manager was not also incentivized to push it. And similarly, from the staff side, because there will be meanings of, I'm shirking responsibility, etc., they were also not willing to take it up. But this thing, COVID, because it forced, I think there's lots of take up and there's a secular trend. Similarly, customers' behaviors were we had to force people to get to online to do simple things, but now it's like passe, right? So those fintechs who are based on digital services, etc., which is bulk of fintech itself, means you're using a mechanism of digital infrastructure, right? So I think those folks have seen traction. The second thing is because there is a flight to quality, typically in a crisis, that what happens, right? You go towards safer bets. People who were blindly focused on top line, on growth, on just at any discount pick customers, etc., are slowly focused on profitability, because investors, because there is a funding crunch, they want to put money only on relatively safe ventures. They are looking for track record of profitability, not just growth. So I think this has been one of my sob stories around fintech, which is everybody seems to be fascinated by valuation. Hey, how many rounds did you go through? A series, B series? It was as if it's it's fashionable to be pulling money from the investor. I think now sanity is prevailing. Hopefully we will see profitable startups come out talked about more than growth ventures. I think these are two trends. And the third one is from an investor standpoint of view, Ritvik, just to close it out. I think because the valuations have corrected, I think strategic investors' interest is going to pick up. Not just financial investors who are looking for a return, but somebody who sees synergy in what they're doing vis-a-vis what a fintech is offering. There is a symbiotic relationship that has now been facilitated because of lower valuation. So I'm hoping that all of these three are positive trends, and I think the story around fintech is only gaining currency. And whether it is urban centers or rural centers, by just this spreading and becoming a phenomena, everybody will gain. I think that's my sense, Ritvik.
Thank you so much, sir. And sir, one more thing, the way you have answered in the last question, the concept of value creation, that mostly cleared my mind the question which I had, just for formality and the thing I had just asked this. Thank you so much, sir. I had a great opportunity in interacting with you. Thank you so much, sir.
So with this, we come to the end of this session. So in the inaugural session today in the morning, our Honorable Chancellor, Sir Dr. Atul Chauhan, very well said that for a leader at your position, there are thousands of commitment, priorities, responsibilities. But sir, still you have taken out time from your super busy schedule and have very humbly accepted our invitation to enlighten our young minds, the future of our nation, to show them the right direction with your par excellence knowledge, experience, farsightedness, and insightfulness. So no words can be enough to thank you for this gesture. On behalf of Amity University, Patna, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for your valuable time and kind presence. We look forward to strengthen the industry and academia relations so that we can create students who are versatile and equipped with all skills to be ready to serve the nation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Professor
Thank you,
Ruchi,
Ram
again,
Gopal
you've
ji.
been
Thank you
very
so much.
generous with your words. Thank you so much. Dr. Pandey, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.